Ball knocked away. Picked up by Boston. Walsh will walk it across the timeline, and this one's over. Well, the defending champion Boston Celtics came to the Bay with a full squad, and the Warriors had to play a letter-perfect game to try to stay with the defending champs. They could not. The Warriors just shot the ball so poorly in the first half, and they end up losing 125-85. Another tough loss for Golden State.
And you can hear it in Tim Roy's voice. Welcome into Warriors Wrap-Up here on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy with you. That was the great Tim Roy, voice of the Warriors here on 95.7 The Game. Yeah, I mean, you could just tell his voice, his tone, it told the story. Warriors lose by 40. They fail a big test. I'm not sure how many of us were coming in expecting the Warriors to win this basketball game, but I'll tell you what, I wasn't expecting a 40-point loss, even with the news that Draymond Green wasn't going to play. And it looks like he's going to miss at least the next 4 games. He'll be reevaluated again next week. The Warriors announced earlier today. So no Draymond. We already know there's no Kuminga. There's no Kyle Anderson. There's still no Brandon Pajemski. Steph Curry, despite rolling his ankle late on Saturday against the Wizards, he played, and the Warriors put up a stinker. They don't even break 90 points. It's becoming commonplace this Warrior team doesn't score 100, but they had scored 90 in every game this year. In each of their first 41 games, they had scored at least 90 points. 90 was their previous low. It happened twice, most recently December 11th in Houston, that really frustrating 91-90 loss that ended the Warriors' run in the NBA Cup. They did themselves one better, or if you look at it the other way, one worse tonight, only scoring 85 points. They do that at home. They shoot sub 35% from the field. They shoot just barely better than 25% from downtown, and they get run off the court on their home floor by the defending NBA champion Boston Celtics, who improved to 30-13. The Warriors down to 21-21. Celtics are, of course, a very good basketball team. And, if the postseason were to start right now, probably would be my favorite to, at the very least, come out of the Eastern Conference, despite what the Cavaliers have done. They're not playing great basketball right now, though. The Celtics aren't. They're a very, very good basketball team. We know this, but I was sitting talking with a couple of members of the Boston media pregame after Steve Kerr got done talking in his pregame presser, and a number of their questions to Steve Kerr was, you're a defending champ. You're trying to get to that level again, but you're kind of going through a rough patch. How do you bounce back, and how do you work through that rough patch? That's where the Celtics are right now. And, of course, all these Celtics media members interested in Steve Kerr's take on that, because Steve Kerr's gone through that. He's been a defending champion as the head coach of the Warriors 4 different times, and there's been obviously some positives after those championships, but there's also been some down stretches. It happens. So there's no one better to answer that question than Steve Kerr. I bring that up just simply because this is not a Celtics team that's playing basketball, say, the way Oklahoma City is, who comes to town in a little bit here in San Francisco as well. This is a Celtics team that has been struggling by their standards a little bit of late, and they came in and absolutely blew the doors off the Warriors. Final score, 125-85. Welcome into Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game. It's Mark Randy with you live from K Fico Pizzeria, one of the newest restaurants here at Thrive City. I'm sitting in their outside area. It's got a bar. You got TVs all over the place. I've got a great view of the Bay, the San Francisco Bay. It's on the east side of Chase Center, K Fico Pizzeria is. If you're leaving Chase Center, or you're milling around trying to figure out what to do after a matinee, kind of a weird time after a Warriors game. It's only 5 o'clock right now. You're looking for a place to grab a bite or to grab a drink and watch a big game that is going on right now. I would, of course, prefer you watch that game on mute and keep it locked here on Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game. But few better places to do that than K Fico Pizzeria, again at Thrive City, on the east side of Chase Center, overlooking the Bay, a great spot. And if you do stop by, visit the outside area and say what's up to me. Come up during a break, and we'll chat it up for a sec as we try to make sense of this Warriors loss. Again, the number to call, the number to text, 888-957-9570. You can join the show. The Warriors back to 500 at 21-21. They scored only 85 points tonight, their lowest point total in a single season. And also, how about this? As we start talking about things that might influence Warriors' decisions and how they go about attacking the trade deadline, how they go about trying to change this roster, what their appetite is for a desperate move, right? We talked so much last week about Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry and Draymond Green before that, talking about how they don't want to mortgage the future for a desperate move right now. And that's a fair opinion to have. I think there's a lot of Warrior fans who are frustrated by that opinion, but that's a fair opinion to have. One thing that might maybe shift the Warriors' motivation is a loss at home like this, with Joe Lacob sitting courtside, watching his team get run off the court, losing by 40 points. And this, by the way, the most lopsided home loss in the Steve Kerr era. Hell, in the Joe Lacob ownership era. You have to go all the way back to 1985, the last time the Warriors lost by more points than they did tonight at home. 1985. We're talking about 11 years before I was even born. The last time the Warriors lost by this many or more at their home court. Of course, not at Chase Center. This is the largest home loss in Chase Center history. Warriors lose by 40. The last time they lost by that much or more was 1985. January of 1985 when they lost by 45 to the Mavericks way back when. And you got Joe Lacob sitting courtside. He sees Warrior fans heading for the exits like at the end of the third quarter. He hears the Boston Celtics crowd, which there was a good contingent of Celtics fans at Chase Center tonight, cheering louder than Warrior fans were in the fourth quarter. Knowing Joe Lacob as much as I do, not personally, but through the way that he feels and what he has said publicly, that's got to frustrate him to no end. Warriors lose by 40 in this one, 125-85. They just couldn't shoot the basketball. I mean, it was a pretty poor shooting game for Golden State. And it isn't necessarily like the offensive execution was just so bad. It's not as if Boston just shut them down and everything the Warriors tried to do, everything the Warriors tried to do, the Celtics didn't let it happen. Like, there was some of that, and it kind of got to that point in the second half. I think there were some other reasons for that, and we can get to that in a little bit here on Warriors Wrap-Up. The Warriors just don't have good enough players. I think it's that simple. I mean, what defenses are doing is they're just not letting Stephen Curry beat them. And if Steph is going to beat them, he's going to do it against a double or a triple team. And if Steph passes the ball up to an open Lindy Waters in the corner, opponents are going to live with that shot, whether it goes in or goes out. The Celtics were going to say to Stephen Curry, and not going to say, what they did say to Stephen Curry and the Warriors tonight was, all right, Steph, we're not going to let you beat us. You're going to get, 15 to 20 tonight. He ultimately finishes with 18 points, did not play the entire third quarter, the entire fourth quarter. But if you are going to beat us, you being the Golden State Warriors, it's going to be Lindy Waters scoring 20. It's going to be Andrew Wiggins scoring 25 points. It's going to be Gary Payton hitting a couple of threes. It's going to be Buddy Hield catching fire. And none of that happened. None of it happened. Sometimes it happens. And when that happens, the Warriors win. In fact, when Buddy Hield scores 18 or more this year, the Warriors are 10-0. 10-0 when Buddy Hield scores 18 or more points this year. And the vast majority of those 18-point performances for Buddy Hield came early in the season. But the reality for the Warriors, especially without Jonathan Kuminga, not that Kuminga is a floor spacer and not that he's going to knock down threes with a ton of regularity, although he was much better at that, specifically the open corner ones when he was in rhythm. He's not going to change the dynamic of the Warriors as a shooting team, but he's going to change the dynamic of the Warriors offensively, just in general. But the Warriors don't have good enough shooters. They do not have a good enough supporting cast. And when Steph Curry is approaching age 37, he'll be 37 in March. We're talking about a month and a half, a little less than 2 months from now, when he'll be 37 years old. He is being asked to do more defensively or more offensively than he has ever been asked to do ever before. And in a matchup like tonight, Boston is also picking on him defensively. We'll get to that in a second here on Warriors Wrap-Up. It's Mark Randy with you. Again, you can join the conversation by giving me a call or shooting me a text, 888-957-9570. That's the number. Again, 888-957-9570. You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, an Odyssey Sports station, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. For a low-rate auto loan, apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. Tonight specifically, and I think everything I just said fits for the Warriors season as a whole. Opponents are just daring the others on the Warriors to beat them. And generally speaking, that does not happen. So Steph is going to be doubled. He's going to be tripled. And opponents are going to say, Lindy Waters hit a three. Buddy Hield, make 5 threes tonight. Gary Payton, make a couple. Trace Jackson Davis, finish down low with regularity. And for the most part this year, that has not happened. What the Celtics did tonight to add on to that is they also made Steph their focal point of their offense and the Warriors' defense. What the Celtics did from the jump was get Steph in a mismatch and then attack him on the mismatch. So get a bigger man switched on to Steph, switch Steph onto a bigger man, whether it comes via a screen and Steph is trying to defend Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum instead of Drew Holiday, who he matched up defending at the beginning. Maybe it's in a fast break where Steph, just in the cluster of racing down the court, is matched up with Kristaps Porzingis. That happened a couple of times in this game. Whenever that switch happened, whenever the mismatch happened, and Steph was on really anybody other than the guy he was supposed to be guarding, either Drew Holiday or Derek White, or maybe when Peyton Pritchard was in, Peyton Pritchard. When Steph was guarding anybody else, the Celtics immediately identified it. Let that player clear out a side, entry into the post, let him back down Steph and get a bucket. So what that does, obviously, is it gives the Celtics an offensive advantage. The defense for the Warriors then has to collapse to help out Steph, who, honestly, for the most part, can hold his own defensively, but he is at a major disadvantage there, size-wise, and it's a match made in heaven for the Celtics. But not that Steph is completely lost out there defensively against anyone that he's guarding. I mean, he is as strong as anybody on the Warriors, believe it or not. He can hold his own, but it's still not a great matchup for Steph and the Warriors. So the defense has to help. And guess what? You help off a Derek White. You help off a Jaylen Brown. You help off a Peyton Pritchard. You help off a Luke Cornett. You help off a Josh Hauser. This is the best three-point shooting team in the NBA, at least they were last year, and they rode that to an NBA championship. They're going to make you pay, and they're going to make their shots from downtown, and they did that again tonight. 20 for 48 from deep were the Celtics, nearly 42% from downtown. So that's one aspect of it. The Celtics just picking at Steph Curry once they get a mismatch, it leads them to good offense. But you're also asking Steph or forcing Steph to exert a lot of energy on defense. And then it goes back to what we've been talking about all season long, which is Steph is pushing 37. He's obviously still an incredible basketball player. By far the Warriors' best player. It is by a mile. Steph was amazing early in his career, and he still is amazing. But by virtue of the roster around him, there has never been a bigger gap between Steph Curry and the Warriors' next best player, right? Like Klay Thompson, a Hall of Fame caliber player. Draymond Green, a Hall of Fame caliber player. Obviously, when they had KD, we're talking about one of the 15 greatest players of all time. Like, Steph, in my opinion, even in the KD era, has always been the Warriors' best player, has always been the Warriors' most important player. But the gulf between Steph and whoever is the second most important player has never been larger than it is right now. Never. And that is a nightmare for the Warriors. This is when you need that to be the closest. This is when you need someone to identify themselves as the heir apparent, as someone who can take a lot of the load off Stephen Curry. And that's what this season has been. This season has been someone's got to help Steph. And it was the story in the first half. The Warriors in the first half were down by 15 points. At halftime, down by 15 points. But they outscored the Celtics when Steph was on the floor. The Warriors were a +2. In Stephen Curry, 17 minutes on the court in the first half, the Warriors outscored the Celtics by 2. Not a big number, but over a half of basketball, that's pretty good. I mean, these are the defending NBA champs, and you're the Warriors without Draymond and Kuminga and Kyle Anderson and Brandon Podziemski. And you're not getting any help from Buddy Hield or from Lindy Waters or from GP2 offensively or from Andrew Wiggins, who was 1 for 11 tonight. Like, that's a pretty big deal. But in the 7 minutes that Steph sat on the bench in the first half, right? 17 minutes on, and the Warriors outscored the Celtics by 2. 7 minutes off the court, the Warriors were outscored by 17 points. That is an absurdly high number over 7 minutes of basketball. The Warriors go from a good basketball team with Steph on the floor to, like, one of the worst teams in the NBA, if not the worst team in the NBA when Steph is off the floor. The bottom line for this Warriors season is, and a lot of it right now is injury, I get it, it would look at least a little bit better if Kuminga was available and if Draymond wasn't out and Podziemski was able to work through some of his on-court struggles without getting hurt. And, hopefully now you'd feel like he'd be in a little bit of a rhythm and playing similar to the level that he played at as a rookie last year. And obviously the Melton injury is a whole thing, and you're not getting a ton from Dennis Schroeder, although he wasn't terrible today, but by no means did he amaze you. The Warriors just are not getting enough from anybody else. And as it relates to what the Warriors should do at the trade deadline, this is a conversation that's going to continue to rage for the next 2.5 weeks. We're about 2.5 weeks away from the trade deadline. I'm not sure if there's a move out there that vaults the Warriors into legitimate contention, but you can't just keep trotting out this same thing. I mean, this is a disaster of a roster right now. Aside from Stephen Curry, you're just getting nothing with any consistency from anybody else on this roster. I mean, Andrew Wiggins has been really good of late. Really good of late. Tonight might have been one of his worst games as a Warrior. In his 23.5 minutes, 1 for 11 from the field, 0 for 4 from downtown. He was a minus 29. He scored 4 points. 4 points in 23.5 minutes on a game when no one was doing anything. You just need some easy buckets. Wiggs, go get us something. Go get us something. But the Celtics can throw wings at you like few other teams, and they're good at defending opposing wings. That's what they did with Tatum and Brown and Drew Holiday and all these guys they can throw out there. Derek White's a hell of a defender. Porzingis can switch onto a wing and hold his own at times. This is a really, really good team, and losing this game is not embarrassing, but the way in which it happened, it was not even competitive. Not even competitive at all. I mean, just look at this example as a way to, like, in your mind, in your head, make sense of how difficult this is on Steph Curry. So, Curry, this was in the third quarter. Steph had just missed a 3 on one possession, and at that point he was 2 for 9 from downtown, okay? 2 for 9 from downtown, not having himself a good shooting night. He got the ball back on the top of the key, and at that point matched up 1v1 against Porzingis. That's like code for attack, Steph. Like, you got a big man on you, whether it's drive past him and score in the paint, or whether it's, size him up, dribble move, behind the back, step back, hit the left wing 3 on the step back, like whatever it is, that's your sign to attack. The Celtics, again, what we were talking about earlier, not letting Steph do that. So, essentially, the second that they see Steph 1v1 with Porzingis, they send Drew Holiday, who was guarding Guy Santos, up to double team Steph Curry. And what does that do? Steph, obviously incredibly confident in his ability. Drew Holiday is a hell of a defender, and Steph is not going to get selfish in that moment. He's going to make the right basketball play. If you've got 2 defenders on just you, that means you've got a 4-on-3 elsewhere. So pass the ball to the open guy and let your teammates break down the defense. That's what made the Warriors dynasty the dynasty, because you would double Steph, and then you've got Draymond handling on a 4-on-3 with Clay one corner, KD in the other, or more recently Jordan Poole in the other, right? Like, you got shooters in either corner, and you got Draymond down the lane. He can either kick to one of the shooters if the help defense comes off those shooters, or you can throw the lob to any of your big men, whether it was Otto Porter in the 2022 championship year, or before that in the KD era when it was JaVale McGee, right? Like, you've got a 4-on-3 and Draymond, one of the best passers in the league, to make the decision with great options everywhere. The difference is now when Steph gets double-teamed and he gives the ball up, as he has done so often in his career, 1, today it's not Draymond making the decision, which hurts. And 2, you don't have options that opponents fear. Drew Holiday is coming off of Guy Santos. If that results in a Guy Santos open 3 versus Steph sizing up Porzingis, the Celtics will take the Guy Santos open 3, I promise you, 1,000 times out of 1,000. Not even a question. Not even a question in their mind. And this is not Guy Santos slander. He's been, really important for the Warriors the last week or so in the absence of Draymond, first with the illness and now with the calf strain. He's been one of the Warriors' most energetic and positive players since he's been kind of inserted into the rotation. This is not Guy Santos slander. This is just simply pointing out the respect that everyone has for Steph Curry, and as a result, how tough it is on Steph Curry to will this Warrior team to victory on a night-by-night basis, because teams are just making him give the ball up and forcing somebody else to do it. They are forcing somebody else to do it, and to this point this year, we're now, by the way, more than halfway through at 42 games played, only 40 games left for the Warriors. No one has consistently done it enough. When you do get that consistent performance from some of the others, you win basketball games. Buddy Hield, again, when he scores 18 or more, the Warriors are 10-0 this year. The vast majority of those 18-point performances came early in the year when the Warriors got out to a 12-3 start. A 12-3 start, and now they're 21-21. And just a couple of games ago, they had dipped below 500. And by the way, teams that start 12-3 or better in their first 15 games had never in the history of the NBA dipped below 500. The Warriors did that all in the space of the first half of the regular season. I mean, just to point out like how rough offensively it is for the Warriors, they had a field goal drought that spanned the first quarter and the second quarter that lasted 7 minutes and 32 seconds of game time. 7 minutes and 32 seconds of game time without a made field goal. I think they had 2 made free throws in that stretch. But 7 minutes and 32 seconds of game time spanning the final 4.5 of the first quarter and the first part of the second quarter. 7 minutes and 32 seconds without a made field goal. And what broke that stretch of field goalless basketball for the Warriors was a Kevon Looney putback off a Lindy Waters airballed corner three. And like air balls tend to go to the offense, and it's an easy putback because the defense is boxing out and kind of creating space under the rim. And there's just Kevon Looney kind of standing there waiting. The ball falls into his lap. It's an easy putback. Like, that's more of a lucky bucket than an earned one by the Warriors. Like, that was not a pass attempt by Lindy Waters. That was a shot that was so off, it was an air ball and led to an easy putback for Kevon Looney. 7 minutes and 32 seconds between made field goals, and that was how it happened. That was how it happened. So, I mean, this is a Warriors offense. And by the way, a chunk of that was with Steph Curry on the court, right? Like, the end of the first quarter, after the Warriors went up 17-15, Steph Curry quickly checked out, and the Celtics went on a 14-1 run to close the quarter after that. No Steph on the court. Like, we know the Warriors aren't anywhere near as good as they are with Steph on the court. That's what happened to close the first. But Steph was back on the floor to begin the second quarter, and the same thing happened. They could not buy a bucket. And some of it was just really, really bad shot making. Poor shot making. Missing open shots. They were, moving the ball and getting some decent looks, just missing them. Some of it was also the Celtics just playing darn good defense and not allowing the Warriors to get going. Now, on the other end, the Warriors' defense in the first half, honestly, I thought was pretty good. It was pretty good in the first half. And again, this is Warriors wrap-up on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy with me, or with you, Mark Randy here, and you can join the conversation. You can join me here on Warriors wrap-up by giving me a call or shooting me a text, 888-957-9570. Let's run through a couple of these texts here, and then I'll get to the Warriors on defense. Again, you can join the conversation, 888-957-9570. The 831 chiming in on our text line. Dubs quickly forget about this debacle at Chase, and you got a huge matchup with the Red Hot Kings on Wednesday night. 831 they do. Kings in Sacramento on Wednesday. And the Warriors will have to make a decision because they got the Kings on Wednesday, and then they've got Chicago. The Bulls come to town on Thursday. So you got a back-to-back in Sac one night, and then at home against the Bulls on Thursday. Decision is which game is Steph going to play and which game is Steph going to sit. Because if the past is any indicator of what's going to happen here, Steph will not play both ends of a back-to-back. The reason has been his bilateral knee tendonitis. It's still bothering him, per reports. And also remember, he had a slight roll of his ankle at the end of the game against the Wizards on Saturday. So I would not expect Steph to play in both games. So the Warriors going to have to figure out which one he's going to play and which one he's going to sit in. Which, again, is going to have an impact on how the Warriors play. I mean, I said it earlier today in the first half. Warriors down by 15 at half. They were outscoring the Celtics, though, with Steph Curry on the floor. But without him, it was a disaster. Now, to be fair to the rest of the Warriors, it was a disaster no matter who was on the court in the second half. That was partly because the Celtics just began hitting their shots at an insanely high clip, and the Warriors' offense got a little bit better in the second half, but let's not pretend that it was anywhere near where it needed to be to beat this Celtics team. I think you heard Tim Roy on the broadcast say if the Warriors were going to win this basketball game, they would have to play essentially their A-plus game, and they probably played much closer to their F game than their A-plus game. What was decent for the Warriors in the first half, again, was their defense. The defense in the first half, not bad at all. The Celtics at halftime only had 54 points. They were shooting 48% from the field. Obviously, pretty good. You'll take that for the course of a whole game, but only 29% from downtown. Warriors were contesting shots, getting out to shooters, doing a decent job defensively, not turning the ball over a ton. 5 turnovers in the first half. Weren't allowing the Celtics to get on the offensive glass. They out-rebounded on the offensive glass, the Celtics 6-4 in the first half. So ultimately, the Warriors in the first half did a pretty good job. And then the third and fourth quarter happened. In the second half, the Celtics shoot a tick under 59% from the field. They go 54% from downtown, 13 for 24 from deep. And honestly, for as bad as the Warriors' offense was, that almost has come to be expected at this point. I mean, you look at some of the Warriors' recent games. Let's just run through it here. Let's tally up the number of times the Warriors have failed to score 100 points of late. This almost never happens in today's NBA, failing to break 100 points. It's exceedingly rare. This year, the Warriors, let's see here. The first time they did not break 100 was November 18th, a loss at the Clippers. They scored 99 points. Okay, that's the first time it happened. They scored 94 in a loss in San Antonio. That's the second time. They scored 99 in a win against Houston, the third time. 90 in a loss to Minnesota, the fourth time, and these now are all coming in rapid succession. The Houston and Minnesota games were back-to-back games, then one other game where they did break 100, and then again 90 the next time. For the fifth game, they failed to score 100. In Memphis, when they lost by 51, the sixth time they failed to score 100. In LA again, the seventh time they failed to score 100. Cleveland at home, the eighth time they failed to score 100. Then consecutive games at home, last homestand, Sacramento and Miami, the 9th and 10th times they failed to score 100. Indiana on the road, the 11th time, and then tonight against Boston, the 12th time. 12 times this year the Warriors have failed to score 100 points. 12 in today's NBA, where you got teams consistently scoring near 120 every single night. The Warriors, 12 out of their 42 games, more than a quarter of their games, and darn near a third, where the Warriors have failed to score 100. I mean, that's the state of this offense. I say that just to say this. The offense, while it was bad tonight, that's not necessarily like the most surprising performance. Celtics are a quality defensive team, and the Warriors, without Draymond, without Kuminga, we knew they were going to be offensively challenged. That wasn't necessarily a terrible surprise. I would have expected more than 85 points. 85 tonight, a season low for the Warriors. But the defense in the second half might have been the most, I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but rough aspect of this basketball game was the Warriors' defense. I mean, in the second half, it almost felt like, and it was a 15-point game at halftime. This game was not over at halftime. Like, the Warriors were in it. I don't know how good you felt about it, but they were in it. Game was not over by any stretch. The defense in the second half, oh man, was it rough. And some of it was the Celtics just absolutely breaking the Warriors down and getting good looks and getting to the rim. Honestly, to me, and you can let me know how you feel, shoot me a text, give me a call, 888-957-9570. It felt like the Warriors kind of waved the white flag in the second half. And the effort on the defensive end, it was pretty darn bad. Whether it was Tatum or Brown or Porzingis just backing down the Warriors into the paint and Warriors help defense refusing to come off and help and try to swipe down and double and come from behind and poke the ball away and just allow a bigger Tatum to back down Buddy Hield or Schroeder or GP2 or Steph or whoever it was. Warriors seemed content with that. In other moments, the Celtics would either kick the ball around or they'd get on the fast break and they'd kick it to an open shooter on the right wing, on the left wing, the left corner, the right corner, wherever it was. It happened everywhere on their half of the floor in the second half. And Warriors, late, a little lazy, rotating, getting out and contesting a shot, just content giving up an open look is what it looked like to me. Maybe I'm being unfair. You can let me know. Again, shoot me a text, give me a call, 888-957-9570. The 925 chiming in saying he expected the Warriors to make it 2-0 on the season, and instead it's their worst home loss of the year. Worst home loss of the year by final score, by margin, no doubt, 925. Considering opponent, though, I wouldn't say this is the Warriors' worst home loss of the year. I don't say that in a good way. I say that in a way that the Warriors have had multiple bad losses at home. This one for me is not the worst. Worst by margin again, but you're playing the defending champions. Remember last homestand, you had just you lost at home, got run off the floor in the fourth quarter by the Miami Heat, who were without Jimmy Butler, going through their own chaos after they had just lost in double overtime in Sacramento the night before while you were sitting at home watching that game on TV. You have the game right before that when you lost to the De'Aaron Fox-less Kings by 30. You got your fair share of rough home losses, and 9-2-5, this one is certainly up there, but this one doesn't take the cake for me. Now, the defense in that second half, again, it was very bad, and I'm not making excuses for them. That was bad. It honestly felt to me like the Warriors, once the Celtics opened up that third quarter by getting on a little bit of a run and pushing the lead upwards of 20, it kind of felt like the Warriors were checking out, and they were, all right, this one's over. Let's pack it up and let's go home and let's regroup and get ready for Wednesday. It felt like that to me, and I know that might be one of the more insulting things that I can say about how I took the game in and how I felt watching the game, but it felt that way. Not a lot of urgency. Not a lot of players sprinting out to contest an open three. Sam Hauser, a great three-point shooter, open in the right corner. Okay, we'll let him take that shot. Peyton Pritchard on the right wing, wide open. No one rushing over to contest. Tatum, not the greatest three-point shooter, but a quality shooter and a great player. He's open. All right, we'll give it to him. It was ugly for the Warriors in the second half, and as a result, they lose by 40 points. All right, we're going to take a break here on Warriors Wrap-Up. Mark Randy with you at the final score, 125-85. Celtics win. Warriors back to 500 at 21-21. We got more to get into. I have a couple of texts that just came in that I want to get to on the other side as well, the 408 and the 415. Appreciate you chiming in. We'll get to you coming up on the other side as we continue. Plus, we got to hear from Steve Kerr, his post-game comments. We also got to check in with the NBA on TNT, guys, because they had a conversation at halftime of this basketball game that you're going to want to hear. All that and more as we continue. It's Warriors Wrap-Up. Mark Randy with you live from Que Fico Pizzeria in Thrive City on the east side of Chase Center overlooking the bay. It is a beautiful evening in San Francisco despite the Warriors' loss, and no better place to take it in than Que Fico Pizzeria, one of the newest restaurants here at Thrive City. Stop by, say hello, watch the football game in their outside bar dining area. Great place after a Warriors game. Again, to stop by, grab a drink, and grab a bite to eat. Time for a break. We're back with more Warriors Wrap-Up next on 95.7 The Game.
45, and they're up 42 right now.
Now back to Warriors Wrap Up on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, the highlights were slim pickings for the Warriors in this one. They lose by 40, as you heard Tim Roy say. They were down by as many as 45. Final score 125-85. A couple of the superlatives from this one. Fewest points scored by the Warriors in a game this year. Their previous low was 90. They did that twice, most recently December 11th in Houston. That really rough 91-90 loss that ended the Warriors' NBA Cup lives this year. They did it one other time, but 85 points. It's now the 12th time the Warriors had failed to score 100 in a game this year, which is astounding. That is an incredibly high number in today's NBA. If that was like the 90s, you feel pretty good about that. But now in 2025, when teams are scoring 120, sometimes 130, hell, even 140 at times, 12 out of your 42 games, you fail to score 100 points. The reality for the Warriors is simply this. They are a very bad offensive basketball team. Their defense generally has still been pretty decent. And for the most part, over the course of the whole season, it's been pretty darn good. Hasn't been as good of late, but still, in general, a pretty good basketball team defensively. The offense, though, since the 12-3 beginning, hasn't just been all right. It's been really, really bad, and that is the reality staring the Warriors in the face right now as they fall back to 500 at 21-21. They lose by 40 tonight, 125-85. It is the Warriors' most lopsided home loss since they lost to the Mavericks on January 15th, 1985 by 45 points. A 45-point home loss in 1985, the last time the Warriors had lost by 40 or more. At home, 1985. We're talking about what? It's now the 20th of January, so we just passed the anniversary of 40 years. 40 years, the last time the Warriors had a home loss as bad or worse than their home loss tonight, 125-85. You didn't get any kind of shooting night, really, from anybody. Steph Curry led the way with 18 points in this one for the Warriors. He was 6 of 16 from the field. Moses Moody played a lot of garbage time, scored 13 points. He was 5 for 13 from the field. Those are the only two in double figures. 9 from Quentin Post, who played essentially the entire fourth quarter. Had a couple of good moments, made a 3, got a lot of shots up in the fourth quarter. 7 from Guy Santos and from Dennis Schroeder. Andrew Wiggins was maybe the biggest disappointment of the night. He's had himself a really nice stretch of late, but 1 of 11 from the field, 0 for 4 from downtown, scored just 4 points. The Warriors outscored by 29 points in his 23.5 minutes tonight. It was rough. The Warriors shoot 34.8% from the field, barely over 26% from downtown. It was a very, very bad offensive day for the Warriors. The Celtics, in turn, shoot over 53% from the field, nearly 42% from downtown, and they win this basketball game going away by 40. Again, the final score, 125-85. All right. Let's hear from Coach Kerr, and then I'll get to your comments on the text line. You can join the conversation by shooting me a text, 888-957-9570. You can also line up your phone calls, and it will come to you next after we hear from Coach Kerr. Again, that number, 888-957-9570. Let's hear from Steve Kerr after the Warriors' worst home loss in 40 years. Here's Coach Kerr after tonight's loss.
I thought we played a good first quarter. I think late in the quarter we had 7 assists, no turnovers. We were getting a lot of good looks. We were competing defensively, but ball wasn't going in. I think we were 1 for 12 from 3 in that first quarter. So didn't feel like the right result for us the way we played in that quarter to go into the second quarter down 11. It felt like we had played better than that, and I think our guys, lost a little confidence. And Boston obviously played a great game and made 23 and overwhelmed us from that point on.
You have at this point, I think it would be 7 of the next 8 at home. How large a stretch do you kind of view this for your season, trying to dive without Draymond and Jonathan, and just like how big is it to kind of, I guess, stabilize here?
I don't even think of the season in those terms. We just, we kind of take it week by week. We've got Sacramento on Wednesday. We've got to flush this one down the toilet and get ready for Sac. We've been very competitive all year, and our guys have fought. But we've had a handful of these where, we just get blown out, and these are demoralizing. So most important thing to me is for our guys to forget this one, have a day off tomorrow, and then be ready to roll in Sacramento on Wednesday.
Steve, the last time you talked about confidence, you described it as a crisis of confidence. Do you see this as a continuing trend, or do you view this game as a real...
No, we're coming off of 2 wins where we played well and competed. And, the way the NBA works these days with so many people launching threes. I mean, we took 53 of them tonight. If you make a bunch of them, you're in great shape. If you don't, the other team makes a bunch, you can be reeling quickly. It's the game has these huge swings, and you're more vulnerable than ever. The way the game is played on nights like tonight when the ball doesn't go in, especially against the defending champs, a great team. So it happens. We just got to, like I said, turn the page and get ready for the next one.
You talk about both teams launching threes like that. When they're not going, would you rather your team do the hoop more, maybe find some range shots, or is the three-pointer such a staple now that you want them to keep shooting it?
I mean, the biggest thing for me is I want good shots. I want rhythm shots. I didn't feel like the ball moved side to side very well in the second quarter, and felt like we got stuck on one side of the floor. So it's never about the number of threes we take. It's more the quality of the offense. We're not a team that gets layups or free throws. It's just not in our DNA. We have to shoot a lot of threes, and we will continue to do so. Nights like tonight, we don't go. Yeah, it's a tough road.
That's Steve Kerr post-game earlier after the Warriors lose by 40 at home to the Boston Celtics. One thing stands out to me, or maybe above everything else, that Steve Kerr said. He said, the guys just got to, quote, flush this one down the toilet, get ready for Sacramento. We've been very competitive all season, and he continued. But what I want to focus on there is him saying that this Warrior team has been very competitive all season, and what I'm sure he is pointing to is the Warriors have played 26 clutch games this year, now out of the 43 games that they've played, 42 games that they've played at 21-21. So more than half, more than half of the games that they have played have been clutch games, which is defined as a game that is within 5 points, the margin in the final 5 minutes of regulation. So 26 times that has been the case for the Warriors, which means, again, at the very least, more than half their games they've been in them. And that's true. That's not a made-up stat. That is a statistic. It is a fact. That's the second most clutch games in the NBA behind the Timberwolves, who have played in 27 entering the day. But the Warriors also have a growing number of blowouts where it feels like the game's over like halfway through the third quarter. They've even had a couple of games where you feel like it's over in the second quarter. And I can run through the schedule and point them out to you. Again, just reacting to what Steve Kerr said, saying, quote, we've been a very competitive team all season. And again, I get where he's coming from, but I would ask, is a team that has been, quote, very competitive all season, one that has all these gigantic blowout losses on their ledger? Cleveland on the road. You lose that one 136-117. But if you remember, they were down by like 50 points in the first half in that one. You had a blowout loss at the hands of the Memphis Grizzlies when you lost by 51 points, 144-93. Cleveland at home again. That was a blowout loss. You lost that one only by 18, but that game felt over at halftime as well. You lost by 30 at home against the Sacramento Kings, who were without De'Aaron Fox, and your next game you lose by 16 against Miami. I know that's not really a blowout loss, but it wasn't a good one by any stretch. And then you have tonight against Boston where you lose by 40 points. So I get what Steve Kerr is saying, but I have a hard time buying that this team is, season-long really competitive when you now have that many just absolute blowout losses where you feel like the game's over at halftime, or at the latest you feel like it's over halfway through the third. This game was over like 4 minutes into the third quarter this afternoon with this MLK Day matinee. It was rough, very, very rough for the Warriors, and it was not necessarily terrible execution offensively. Steve Kerr talked about that on his in his post-game presser, talking about how it felt like we were playing better than being down by 11 after the first quarter. Sometimes your shots just don't go in, and that's true. This is a make-or-miss league. If you're making your shots, you're going to be in games. If you're missing them, if they're wide open, if they're contested, you're going to lose. And in the first quarter, and I think for the majority of this game, the Warriors simply just were not making their shots. But that isn't like all right, that's okay, they'll make them next time. Like, this is a disturbing trend for the Warriors where even if they're getting good shots, they have a hard time making them. And I think the reality that is staring the Warriors directly in the face, and I can go back to one of our texts here on the text line, 888-957-9570, the 408 asking me, so what's the solution, Grandy? That is the $1 million question. The $1 million question is what's the answer here, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's a single move or even a pair of moves the Warriors can make that magically transforms this team into a legitimate title contender. So that seems to be the reality for the Warriors. But there's ways you can get better. There are plenty of ways that you can get better. But you've got to ask yourself, what are you getting better for? Are you getting better for the final couple of years of Steph's career, which, by the way, it will only get more difficult to win, in the final few years of Steph's career. Like, this isn't easy right now. It's going to get more difficult as Steph continues to age, as Draymond continues to age, as Steph Curry's contract continues to go up and he gets paid more every year, and it gets harder to balance a budget and a roster around that. Not that Steph doesn't deserve it. Of course he deserves it, but it's only going to get more difficult. So if you're the Warriors and you're trying to figure a way out of this mess, you got to ask yourself, is it worth going all in right now? I think a lot of Warriors fans feel that way. But again, the comments from last week made by Stephen Curry and Steve Kerr, and prior to that, Draymond Green, this team feels uncomfortable. And not just the front office, who are in it for the long haul, right? Mike Dunleavy has plans on being the GM here for a long time. Joe Lacob has no plans of selling this franchise. He's locked and loaded to be here for a very, very long time. Like, they're not just solely focused on the next 3 years, right? Like, they want to be competitive every single year and into the future. So it's one thing if those guys, that group, the group that's going to be here for years to come, are a little less interested in a desperate move now that might hurt them in the future. But if you're talking about the group of Stephen Curry and Draymond Green and Steve Kerr, who are probably all within their last, 4 years of being Warriors, like 4 years from now, are any of those players going to, and coaches going to be on this team still? Probably not. Like 5 years from now, for sure, probably not. You never know, but like, we're getting down the stretch of this. And if you are in Steph's position or Draymond's position or Steve Kerr's position, it's much easier for you then to say, yeah, to hell with the future, right? Pull the Los Angeles Rams and say, F those picks, and let's try to get a championship. It's what the Rams did, and they won a Super Bowl doing it. And they lost yesterday to the Eagles in Philadelphia. We can get into that. I'm sure it happened earlier today here on 95.7 The Game. That's just an example of what one team did to try to win right now, and they've actually done a really good job of rebounding despite their lack of draft picks and young capital. They have bounced back, and they were a really good team and won their division this year. That's one way. But again, the comments from last week were from the people who might not be here in 4 or 5 years, and even they were saying it's not worth a desperate move to try to help us win now that might, mortgage the future. And maybe as a result, sure, we're a little better now, and maybe it gives us a slight chance to try to win, but the odds are it probably still won't be enough to let us win, so why are we going to do that and completely empty our cupboard for the future? Not that I agree with that. I'm just laying out their thoughts. That's their thought process. And my point is, if that's what that group of people are thinking, the group that is not going to be here in 5 years, then I don't know how anyone else in the organization can possibly disagree with that. Because if those people are feeling that way, how do the people who are planning on being here for the next decade plus, how is that group going to feel? I don't know. It seems like they're just kind of chill, riding this thing out. And obviously, as Steph Curry said after the win in Minnesota, and how he was obviously a little frustrated by all the talk about trades and how this team can improve and get better. He told, everyone with those Twitter fingers can kind of shut up a little bit, let us figure this thing out. Like, I get where you're coming from, Steph, but when the message you're sending is this group isn't worth investing in because we don't want to mortgage the future, like, it's hard to hear that and think that this team is going all in to try to win right now. And again, the reality might be that there's just no real move out there. Takes two to tango. You got to have a trade partner, right? It takes two to make these things work. And maybe there's nothing available that the Warriors feel makes a real difference for them going forward. And if that's the case, then I don't know what the hell the answer is. Because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You make the move, and maybe you're a little better now, but you're still maybe a first-round exit in the playoffs. Who knows? But then suddenly you don't have first-round picks a couple of years in the future, and then you hurt your chances at being better in the post-Steph Curry era. It's a real conundrum. It's a real conundrum for the Warriors. But I think one other thing that stands out to me from this game, and we got some calls lining up. We'll go out to you in just a second. David in Maryland, I see you. We're coming to you in just a second. Appreciate the call. One other thing that stands out is you have those post-game comments made by Steph and Steve, and Draymond also talked about it, and how you don't want to be desperate and make a move that might mortgage your future. Not that is that group waving the white flag, because I think that giving up talk is what frustrated Steph Curry and Steve Kerr so much, and how they came out and railed against that in their next public speaking forum. It's what it kind of feels like. It's what it sounds like. And then I think it might be easier for, say, Lindy Waters or for anybody else on this Warriors roster, for Dennis Schroeder, for Andrew Wiggins, for Gary Payton II, for Kevon Looney, for Buddy Hield to say, well, that's how our stars feel. That's how our head coach feels. We're down by 20 points here in the second half against the Celtics. Like, what am I going to push myself for? From the outside looking in, that is kind of how those comments fall to me. And now I could understand how it might be affecting the rest of the team. Like, I get entirely where the Warriors are coming from. And, Steve and Steph and Draymond and whoever else, if you're listening, I know you're probably frustrated with the way that I feel and the way that I'm talking about this. And I get it. I'm trying to understand. But that is how that is being interpreted, I think, by a lot of Warriors fans. As if it's, it's all but over. That it's just not going to happen. And that kind of feels defeatist, even if that is the reality. And, the Jimmy Butler haul that the Heat are asking for is way, 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 way too much. It's Wiggins and it's Kuminga and it's 4 first-round picks and it's other salary filler. Like, okay, I get it. That's a terrible move. Don't make it. But from the outside looking in, it is really, really frustrating to watch this Warrior team come out lifeless. And I do kind of point to some of those comments that kind of feel like the Warriors aren't giving up and they're still fighting like hell. Of course, we know that. But it doesn't always feel that way. And tonight in the second half, it certainly did not feel that way. Okay, let's go out to David, who's standing by in Maryland. David, I know you want to react to this Warrior loss. They lose by 40, 125-85. You're on Warriors Wrap-Up. David, how you doing?
Oh, I'm not doing good. I'm not doing good, but I'm happy that you took my call. How are you doing?
I'm trying to stay with this. I mean, a 40-point loss, David. It's hard to find something positive to talk about.
Yeah, man, there isn't really much positive to talk about. I mean, what can I say? How about those Twitter fingers, huh? How about those Twitter fingers? I mean, I'm a big fan of Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry is one of my favorite basketball players in the world. But I mean, gosh, you come out and you say that the Twitter fingers should be quiet and let them figure it out. We don't want to give up the young people because that would be irresponsible. I mean, look at the product that we've witnessed. We just got blown out by 40 points. And, I mean, we're supposed to just act like all the Warriors fans just didn't know what they were talking about. Or, I mean, if all of us got the wrong message when Steph, Draymond, and Curry came out and said what they said, I mean, it's not just us that got the wrong message. I mean, did we see Stephen A. Smith? Did we see it? Around the association, the response to what Steve, Dre, and Kerr said was that it seems like everyone's giving up. It seems like that's, I mean, I don't know what, I can't remember what this one guy's name is, but he's constantly covering LeBron. He said that he's never heard a player of Steph's caliber give this type of comment in the midseason. And
yeah, it was Brian Windhorst. Brian Windhorst, David.
Windhorst, exactly. So how, I mean, we can't all be confused. I mean, it's not like we can't all have just received the wrong message from this. It's just disappointing. You know, when you keep getting the same thing over and over again at every trade deadline, I mean, how else are we supposed to react to what we're seeing? And I know Joe Lacob can't be happy with what he's seeing, or, I mean, do we even know if he's happy or if he's upset? I mean, we haven't seen him in like 5 years. So, I mean, you know, like, what are we going by here? I mean, we can only watch the games as fans. So I think it was really upsetting for me personally, just to finish up. It was upsetting to hear what Steph has to say when he knows that this season has been disappointing. I understand his own frustration because he's on the team and he has to deal with it. But, I mean, man, we have to watch it too. So, I mean, you can't expect everybody to be quiet. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate the call, David. And I think you speak for a lot of Warrior fans. I'll answer kind of your question there about Joe Lacob. I guarantee you Joe Lacob is not happy. He's frustrated as hell, and he hates watching this Warrior team lose as much as anybody. Like, I guarantee you that. I mean, he's sitting courtside at every single home game, and if you're at Chase, you're lucky enough to go to a game or two, keep your eyes on Joe Lacob. If you're sitting on the side of Chase Center that has the benches on that side, like if you're sitting on the side that where the Warriors sit or where the scorer's table is, like Joe Lacob is on the other half of the court, front row, like he's opposite of the Warriors bench. You can find him and keep an eye on him during the game, and he'll show you how he's feeling. Like, he doesn't have to speak. You can see it. He's kind of like Steph in that way. His body language speaks, you know, and shows exactly how he feels. He's not happy. I can guarantee you that. I mean, it's how I opened the show here tonight on Warriors Wrap Up on 95.7 The Game. You can give me a call, shoot me a text, 888-957-9570. Nights like tonight, and, you know, the Sacramento Kings loss and the Miami Heat loss at home, and these have all come in rapid succession, those are nights that are, like, opinion-shifting nights, right? Like, you lose at home to Oklahoma City, right? And you were without Stephen Curry early in the year, and you only lost by, I think it was 4. Like, that's not an opinion-shifting loss, right? Like, it's a really good team. You were without your best player, and you stayed with it. Like, that might be an opinion-shifting loss, like in the positive. Like, oh, hey, we might be better than I thought. But if we're talking about an opinion-shifting loss in the negative, like, though these recent losses are opinion-shifting losses. Now, I don't know what that is shifting the opinion to, because you can kind of go 2 different ways. If you see the way the Warriors are playing of late, and I know they had just won 2 games in a row. They beat Minnesota in Minnesota. Minnesota, though, is like neck and neck with the Warriors for the most underperforming team in the NBA this year, and you'd probably say Minnesota is that team because they were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and they're hovering with the Warriors right around 500 in the play-in, out of the play-in. They're in the same spot as the Warriors and the Suns, who are all kind of in that same underperforming boat. And then you beat the worst team in the NBA, the Wizards, at home. Like, okay, you won 2 games in a row, nice. But let's not pretend like either of those teams are world beaters. And the Wizards certainly are not, and they were in it the whole way. And your former player, Jordan Poole, put up 38 points on you. So, like, a couple of nice wins. I'm not taking that away from the Warriors, but it's not as if that was, you know, a motive shifter for the Warriors. But their recent losses against Sacramento at home and Miami at home, and today, 40-point loss against the Celtics, with Joe Lacob sitting courtside watching every single second of this game and watching Warriors fans leave in the third quarter and hearing Celtics fans honestly be louder than Warrior fans for the majority of the second half, that's something that might impact the way the Warriors make decisions going forward. And again, to get back to what I was saying earlier, I get sidetracked earlier, apologies. I don't know what the opinion might be shifting to, because you can look at this a couple of different ways. You can say, well, the Warriors lost by 40 to the Celtics tonight. They're clearly not good enough, and even a move here or there in terms of like a buying move, getting better, isn't going to be enough. So instead of buying, let's sell. Now the question and the problem with selling for the Warriors is that they don't really have a ton of pieces to sell other than essentially their untradeable pieces. And they're not going to trade Steph, and they're not going to trade Draymond. So I think we can just forget about that. As much as we might think it's a logical path forward for this organization, you might feel that way, you might not. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. But maybe that's where the Warriors go. Maybe they feel like, well, the best thing we could do is to not buy, but we also don't want to stand pat and not take advantage of an opportunity. But maybe the other aspect of this is, instead of convincing the Warriors to not make a move, it's, well, this team desperately needs help, and they need help now. Let's pull the trigger on the quote-unquote desperate trade that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and Draymond Green were talking about, because maybe now this 40-point loss at home, which were on the heels of the Kings loss and the Heat loss, maybe now that's enough, and it makes us more able to stomach giving up perhaps more than we wanted for a veteran aging player who might be enough to make this team better, but we're not so sure if they're enough to put the Warriors over the top. Like that's a couple of different ways the opinion can be shifting. There was the report after the Kings loss where it was Joe Lacob, the owner, majority owner, and general manager Mike Dunleavy, who met at the Bridge Club, which is just off the floor, right outside the Warriors locker room, where the media walks by to chat with Steve Kerr postgame in the bowels of Chase Center, and they were having, a relatively loud conversation, and you could tell that specifically Joe Lacob, but the group, the two of them, were frustrated. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if there was another similar conversation after tonight's loss. Maybe it didn't happen in the Bridge Club, but they often kind of meet there post games. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But tonight, and the way that the Warriors lost this game, and the effort level in that second half, specifically defensively, not good. And you could tell it immediately. And I'm sure that does not sit well with Joe Lacob. 888-957-9570. We'll go out to the phone lines in a second. Hassan, stay there. I'm coming to you in a minute, but first I want to remind you that you're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, and Odyssey Sports Station, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. For a low-rate auto loan, apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. Let's go out to Hassan in Dublin. Hassan, what's up? You're on Warriors Wrap-Up. How you doing?
Good, I'm doing great. Thank you for taking my call. So I'm a very avid admirer of Warriors for many, many years. Watched a lot of basketball. And to the question what Warriors can do, I actually feel there is no good move out there at this point. So to Steph's point, I don't think there is much on the market unless we really give up everything. But to another point, I think we Warriors are not considering as a coaching change. Warriors need to really look at, Steve is a fantastic coach, done amazing stuff for Warriors. But he has made a lot of mistakes in a lot of clutch games, as you mentioned earlier in your show. I particularly don't like the rotations, the amount of rotations that we go through. Every other game or every game we have a different starting lineup. No rotation seems to find a grounding feed. And I think that is a lot to do where we are right now at 21-21. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Hassan. I think there's a decent chunk of Warrior fans who are in lockstep with you. Not that they think Steve Kerr is a bad coach or that the way that this season has gone, really the last 2.5 seasons has gone, takes away everything that he accomplished. But that maybe things are getting or feel a little bit stale. I personally am of the belief that I don't think that the system that the Warriors run and the way in which they've run this team specifically offensively, I don't think that is very complementary to the roster that they have. Like, the skill set of the players on this team, I just think don't fit with what you need to run this style. Like, you need shooting, you need ball handlers, and you need quick split-second decision makers. And honestly, the Warriors don't have a lot of those. You got Stephen Curry, and Jonathan Kuminga was getting much better at that, the split-second decision-making. But let's not forget, when the Warriors were in Minnesota in December, Steve Kerr called out Jonathan Kuminga postgame for his decision-making. Like, this is a Warriors roster that even when they're fully healthy, don't have a ton of those guys. So this might more so be a failure of roster construction, but then maybe also a lack of willingness to adjust or to plan your attack around the strengths of your roster. So I think maybe there's plenty of blame to go around there. Now, Hassan, I think, again, like I said, I think there's a number of Warrior fans who feel similarly to how you feel about Steve Kerr. And in fact, I think I see one of them on our text line right now. And you can join the conversation by giving me a call or shooting me a text, 888-957-9570. The 650 has been busy here on the text line. He asks, what is up with Kerr's obsession with running undersized at every position? How many times do we have to see that 3 guys at 6 foot doesn't work? You can't tell me you like running Curry, Schroeder, and GP2. 650, appreciate the text. I hear a little bit of what you're saying. I would say tonight is a pretty unique situation because the Warriors, without Kuminga, without Draymond, and without Kyle Anderson, 3 of their, even though they're not really that big individually, 3 of the Warriors' bigger players. This is, in reality, a very short roster, but those are indeed 3 of the Warriors' biggest players. And the other option to get bigger, 650, is, I don't know, does Moody make a big difference to you? The reason why the Warriors started GP2 is so that they could have a decent defender and a higher than average defender on both Tatum and Brown. If you were saying put Moses Moody in there instead of GP2, you're asking Moses Moody to guard either Tatum or Brown. And while Moody has the ability to be an okay defender, that's probably not going to work as well as GP2 might. Tonight, I think 650 was specific to who was available for the Warriors, and they just did not have a lot of their big men available. Now, you might point to Looney and TJD and Quentin Post. I will fire back at you and say, 1, the Warriors are never going to play a single second where both Looney and TJD are on the court together because that is just offensive suicide. And 2, Quentin Post is a rookie, and Steve Kerr only feels comfortable playing him in blowout time, in garbage time, or when the Warriors legitimately have no other options like they did in Indiana when they were down like their 5 best players. That's just the reality the Warriors are living in right now, and maybe you think that Quentin Post should be getting minutes regardless, and okay, I'll let you have that opinion, but he's a rookie, and we still don't know a lot about him. I wouldn't expect that to go over well if it was happening in, important minutes. But the reality is, I think to the 650, the Warriors roster just is not simply good enough. And honestly, any combination that Steve Kerr puts out there isn't probably going to be all that good. That's just the Warriors' reality. Now, the 650 has chimed back in and said Moody would help, and Moody could space the floor better with his three-point shot. No doubt. No doubt, Moody would space the floor better than GP2. There's no doubt about that, 650, but I think you're losing some defensively, even if you're asking GP2 to guard Tatum. Even though there is a pretty large height difference there, GP2 is an awesome defender. An awesome defender. No matter what you feel about him offensively, he is an awesome defender. Now, I think to add on to this 650, you might be onto something here. I think the Warriors need to emphasize at this point in the season what is best for them offensively as opposed to defensively. Even though defensively it was not good in the second half tonight, defense has largely been much, much, much better than the Warriors' offense over the last 2 months. Again, you're failing to score 100 points relatively often now. You got to do whatever you can to figure out your offense, and if it hurts your defense, which it very well might, you cross that bridge when you get there. You got to figure out a way to score more points. You're not going to win games if you don't score 100 in today's NBA. I think the Warriors have scored 101 just once, or less than 101 once, when they scored 99 earlier this year. You got to score 100 at the very least, and the Warriors are not doing that often enough to even be close to being considered a good basketball team. You got to do whatever you can to score more points. So maybe you go with the way the 650 is thinking, and you put out an offensive group to begin games, and you try to keep up with an opposing offense. That's still not going to be easy. But I think you got to do everything you can to put a group out there when Stephen Curry is on the court that is as complimentary to Steph as possible, and the way you do that is by getting as much shooting out there, as much ball handling out there. But again, the issue is the Warriors don't have that player that can take that load off of Steph. That was who Dennis Schroeder was supposed to be, and that acquisition has largely flopped. Not the Warriors' fault. I mean, I don't think so. I don't give the fault to the Warriors. It seemed like a home run acquisition. They gave up essentially nothing, a net of 2 second-round picks, which in the NBA is as close to nothing as you can possibly get. And you got a quality player who was averaging more than 18 points per game coming into this one, coming into his time with the Warriors. So, I don't know. The Warriors are in a situation where there's just not a very clear, easy, right answer. And that's just the Warriors' reality at this point. It is not an easy thing. Okay, let's keep it rolling here on Warriors Wrap-Up. I know a lot of you want to chime in, so keep the text coming, keep the calls coming, 888-957-9570. One thing we are going to do here, I think it was what one of our callers was talking about earlier. I believe it was David, who was calling from Maryland, talk about what some of the other talking heads are saying about the Warriors, and he pointed out what Brian Windhorst said about Steph Curry's comments about how they don't want to be desperate and make a move that damages the future. A couple other talking heads talked today. In fact, at halftime of this Warriors and Celtics game, when it was still a game, by the way, it was only a 15-point Celtics lead, and I say only because it eventually ballooned to 45, and the Warriors ultimately lost by 40. But the NBA on TNT, that's where the game was broadcast tonight on television. Of course, you also heard it here on 95.7 The Game. Their studio crew, led, of course, by, Chuck, Charles Barkley, and Shaq, and Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson, who does a great job. They had some things to say about the Warriors and how they should move forward. Let's first hear Kenny Smith talk about what the Warriors should do. Here is Kenny Smith, courtesy of the NBA on TNT, on the Warriors.
I want to talk about the rebuild.
Which rebuild?
With Golden State. And they're in a similar situation as what the Lakers are in, but much different in the same results. When you're rebuilding around LeBron James, and you say, hey, he's later in his years, he's maybe not the same player, but he's still a great player, or one of the top players in the league. LeBron James plays with the ball in his hand. So you have to build the team that actually fits in. So you're going to bring in older players. I think with Steph Curry, he actually plays without the ball a lot, and he's running off picks. So now you can bring in and say, we're going to do a young rebuild with young energy to get him shots easier because he's shooting more instead of beating people off the dribble. So the rebuild is different. They should go young through the draft, through trade, keep guys like Kuminga, not think about trading. Guys like Kuminga and his age, that group is where they need to be. Where the Lakers, they need to get older players at times to go with LeBron because LeBron handles the ball.
Interesting. That's Kenny Smith, NBA on TNT, at halftime of tonight's Warriors-Celtics game. Interesting because I feel like generally the way people talk about this is, you go all in and you try to win by acquiring a veteran. And the way you acquire a veteran, one, you got to make the money equal, but you give up your assets, your younger assets, whether that means Kuminga, or it means Moody, or it means Pajemski, or TJD, or if it's draft picks, or whatever the case is. That's generally, I think, the way people think about it. What Kenny is saying is you can still try to put the best you can around Steph, but maybe the best thing to have around Steph is youthful energy and young players, because it's just not working with these veterans. I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with Kenny in that it's better to have young players around Steph if you're really trying to compete, but I mean the flip side is it's working at a 500 clip right now with this group. So really, what is the opportunity cost? What are you losing out on if you go younger and you lean on all your young players and you just say, all right, when Kuminga's back, he's playing 30 minutes a night. Moody, you're going to be playing 25 minutes a night. Hey, we're going to get Quentin Post some consistent minutes. Guy Santos is going to play for us as well. And you're going to trade away, say it's Buddy Hield, and it's Dennis Schroeder when he's available to be traded the day before the deadline, and it's GP2, and it's, Kevon Looney, as much as that would pain the Warriors to do, maybe there's logic in doing that. Not that those players individually or even packaged together are going to get you anything of any major value in return. But, you know, an asset is an asset, even if it's a couple of second-round picks, and maybe you package those with something and you're able to trade up in the draft. And who knows? It's better to have an asset than to not. But if you are in the belief that Kenny Smith is, that what's better around Steph is youthful energy anyway, and this veteran-laden group is just giving you a 500 record, then you might got to ask yourself, well, what's the point of continuing down this road? We don't have to go full tank, full rebuild, full one extreme and trade Steph and trade Dre. You keep Steph and you keep Dre, and you trade a lot of the other veterans, and you just lean into the youth otherwise. Because I got news for the Warriors and all Warrior fans out there. If you continue with this, even once Kuminga gets back, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good enough. And I think most of us can agree that even if the Warriors were to make a move and they got in someone that is supposed to help the team, like say a Nikola Vucevic or say a Cam Johnson, or say you even go big game hunting even more, and you get a Jimmy Butler or a Zion Williamson, that isn't going to, I think, make this team a championship team right now. And I think the Warriors feel that way based on the way that they're talking about the plans of the deadline, right? Like just last week, Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, Draymond Green, all within, days of each other. And the Steph and Steve comments happen on the same night. Like, we're not trying to mortgage our future for a shot in the dark at something now. So if that's the way they feel about the trade market, then it's hard to believe they feel like there's anything out there that can really help them that much. If you feel that way, maybe you flip it the other way, not the entire other way, and trade Steph and trade Dre, but you trade a lot of your other veterans, you lean on your youth, and you hope leaning on the youth now makes them better next year. You get a quality rookie with your first-round pick, which, who knows, might be top 10 this year if you continue to hover around 500. And then you're looking at maybe a team that is better next year as a result. Maybe that's the way the Warriors go. That's what Kenny Smith was arguing, and I honestly can see a little bit of the logic in that. Now, Charles Barkley did respond. Let's hear what Chuck had to say. Again, this is courtesy of the NBA on TNT. Here's Charles Barkley responding to Kenny Smith about what the Warriors should do.
It doesn't matter what they do unless they go out and get a superstar and try to rebuild. That's their only chance because Steph is old. I think they should try it because who's the only team we sure of in the West? If they made a big trade is what I said. Getting younger ain't going to make them better.
I'm gonna dismantle to get young.
All right, and that was Charles Barkley again. I think his opinion is how a lot of people feel. If you're getting younger, you're kind of waving the white flag, and you're not thinking that you're going to be better than you currently are. Kenny Smith might disagree. You might agree. You might disagree. I'm not sure. You can let me know. 888-957-9570. I think that is the general logic, right? Most people feel like the younger you get, the worse you're going to be. But you got to look at these Warriors veterans and ask yourself, what are they really bringing the Warriors right now? They're not bringing the Warriors a lot. The other half of it is, again, what we just talked about, where Chuck maybe disagrees with me. You make a major move, take a major swing. Are you good enough to win in the West? I don't know about that. It also feels like the Warriors don't feel that way. Maybe the Warriors feel like if you got Jimmy Butler in here, they could be good enough to win a series or two in the West. But the reason they don't want to do it is because that slight chance at being competitive isn't worth what it might cost you in the future. Because maybe the Heat and Pat Riley, notorious stickler, right, are asking for Kuminga and for Wiggins and for the extra salary filler to make the salaries match, and also for first-round picks. And maybe the improvement, the bump for this current team, it gets outweighed by what it might cost you in the future. I think those are the two realities. Either the Warriors are so dead set on the opinion that any move does not make them good enough to make it worthwhile, or every move that makes them good enough to make it worthwhile, the asking price is way too high, and it's not even worth thinking about doing. It's one of those two. It has to be one of those two, and probably the Warriors feel, because they believe so much in Steph Curry, they feel that it's the latter. It is just the asking price is too high. Steph isn't going to demand it, so we're not going to do something that might be a net negative for this franchise, even if that means this year continues to be very ugly. Hell, it might mean next year is going to be ugly as well. But right now, it definitely is ugly, and the hits keep coming because the Warriors are going to be without Draymond Green for at least another week. The Warriors released today that the MRI on Draymond Green's calf strain revealed a minor calf strain. He will be reevaluated in 1 week. The Warriors in Sacramento on Wednesday. Thursday, the back end of a back-to-back at home against the Bulls. Lakers next Saturday at home. And then a week from tomorrow, Utah is at home. That would be the potential earliest Draymond's return date could be, which means he missed tonight, and he will miss Sacramento, he will miss Chicago, and he will miss the Lakers as well. We will see when we get an update from Draymond Green at some point next week, but I would not be shocked if he also misses Utah. Hell, he might even miss the other back-to-back, which is coming up after that Utah game on Tuesday. Oklahoma City is in town on Wednesday. This is a really important stretch, though, for the Warriors, because you have a stretch right now, 9 games, beginning with the Saturday game against Washington, all 9 games in NorCal, in Northern California, and 8 of the 9 games at home. Washington on Saturday, tonight against Boston. You're 1-1 so far. In Sac on Wednesday, at home against the Bulls, the Lakers, the Jazz, the Thunder, Phoenix, and then 2 weeks from today at home against Orlando. What is your record at the end of that 9-game stretch? You've got 7 games left of it. You're sitting at 500. The Warriors got to get some home cooking going, and you got to aim for at the very least 4 wins in your next 7. You'd love to go 5-2, and you could go out on a road trip sitting at 26-23. That would feel all right, but you got to get some home cooking going. There's no doubt about it. All right, Warriors lose this one by 40, 125-85. The Dubs back to 500 at 21-21. As we just talked about, coming up next for the Warriors, they're in Sacramento on Wednesday. Tip-off is at 7, which means pregame coverage begins at 6 right here on 95.7 The Game. All right, that'll do it for us tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Mark Randy signing off. Thanks, as always, to Cam Williams behind the glass. Good to have you back, Cam, after he was off last week. And Steven Risotto as well, getting us all those cuts and pieces of sound. Appreciate him and his efforts as always. Thanks so much for listening. This is Mark Randy signing off from K Fico Pizzeria. Beautiful spot here in Thrive City on the east side of Chase Center, overlooking the bay. The sun has set. It is dark on the East Bay and the Oakland Hills, but you can still see the skyline of the East Bay. A beautiful setting here at K Fico Pizzeria, and I'm about to dive in to their chicken cutlet sandwich. It smells delicious. I recommend stopping by. You can watch a game here. You can grab yourself a drink, grab a bite to eat. K Fico Pizzeria in Thrive City on the east side of Chase Center. Thanks so much for listening. This is Mark Randy signing off. We'll talk next time here on 95.7 The Game.